is Cliff Ratza. I'm the author of two ongoing series of novels, the Lightning Brain series and its sequel, the Keeper series. And in addition to being an author and a writing coach, I teach at universities and have a consulting business. If you'd like to learn more about me, my books, or my writing coach activities, please contact Prime Solutions via the lightningbrainseries.com website. Now, I try to make videos that I think authors and writers and most people might enjoy listening to. And I try to make them different. I try to cover material that you might not see on the news or in YouTube or other videos. I figure that if I can't find a different point of view, there's no reason for me to add something that you can find elsewhere. Well, the title of this video is Hard Problems Explained. Why We'll Never Know Everything. And before I launch into my talk, I thought I would mention a couple of books. Here's the first one. This is a fun book to read. See it okay? There. It's The Physics of Superheroes. And it's a fun read. It's a nice little scientific explanation, and believe me, it's written in a fun style. It's written by a physicist, a professor of physics at the University of Michigan by the name of James Kakalius. And it explains the physics behind the stunts pulled by superheroes in comic books and movies. And the second book is The Science of Star Trek. I read it a while ago. There are several books with this title, and all of these books try to give a bit of science to the science fiction fantasies shown in the series. Now, I like science fiction too, and I'm willing to I'm willing to suspend disbelief while reading or watching the always popular science fiction genre. But the books I just mentioned, as well as articles and videos that I read or watch regarding scientific breakthroughs, always make it seem like progress is unlimited. The time travel and visitors from outer space will get here soon. But the laws of physics say this might not be so. And in this podcast, I'll give some simple answers why this is the case. According to our latest understanding of how our brains work, there is no mind-brain duality. They are one and the same. Simply different ways of looking at the brain. All that exists in the universe, this is what the Greeks told us, all that exists are atoms and the void. And that means that all we are or can think of comes from matter in the form of our genes and DNA. Here are some of our limits. 1. Our brain can't handle too much complexity. We can't keep track of more than 7, plus or minus 1 or 2 things, in parallel. That means simultaneously. And that also means we can't deal with the concept of infinity. By the way, there are an uncountable number of infinities. The first infinity is the infinity of the counting numbers. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, ... Well, the next infinity is the infinity of the real numbers. For example, all the numbers between 0 and 1. Well, there are infinities beyond those two. I'm not going to try to explain them. They're very hard to visualize. But the point is that there are lots of infinities out there, and it's difficult for even mathematicians. to grasp the concept of infinities. And then there's the great logician Kurt Gödel. He proved his incompleteness theorems that tell us that even mathematics and its logic has built-in inconsistencies. There are theorems in mathematics that that are true, but we can't prove them, and there are theorems we can prove that might be false. And then there's the great philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. I always like pronouncing that name. Ludwig Wittgenstein. He concluded that these inconsistencies in our understanding of mathematics and infinities, well, he concluded that these inconsistencies are caused by language. All languages are ultimately recursively self-referential and illogical. There are thoughts that we have or observables that we can sense that we cannot articulate. We cannot put them into words. And here's one of his famous quotes. "For that which I cannot speak of, I must remain silent." And that tells us there are things we will never know. Willard Quine gives us an out. He talks on the limits of knowledge, and in it he says that we can know the answer to anything if we simply exclude the things that we cannot articulate. Well, that doesn't get us very far. By the way, Quine was an American philosopher and logician in the analytic tradition, recognized as one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. And Ludwig Wittgenstein was an Austrian-British philosopher who worked primarily in logic, the philosophy of mathematics, the philosophy of mind, and the philosophy of language. He is considered by some to be the greatest philosopher of the 20th century. And Kurt Gödel, the guy that proved these incompleteness theorems, he was where was he from? Let's see. He was from somewhere. Very smart guy. And he eventually came to the United States, and he was a buddy of Einstein. They worked at I think it was Princeton's Institute of Advanced Physics. And Kurt Gödel, very, very influential person. I studied some of his works. Gave me a headache and more. Then there's the explosion principle. That's a principle in mathematics that says if an argument contains somewhere in it an assumption and its negation, we can prove anything. And if we look deeply enough into many of the arguments in philosophy or high-energy physics, the explosion principle lurks somewhere. However, even though there are limits to what we will ever know, we can always make progress. We can approach these limits asymptotically, making incremental progress forever, but never reaching the limits. If you studied calculus, you know what the limit of a function is. And even if you haven't, you know what it is. Think of stepping from where you are to another spot. Make each step cover half the remaining distance. You will step forever, never getting there, but you sure get close. Well, here is the chain of events in humanity's evolution that got us to where we are. It starts when prehistoric man, sitting around the campfire at night, wondered about the world he lived in. He figured out that he existed, and that means he's the subject, and everything else did too. Those are the objects. But he was too busy just trying to survive to have time to think much further. So he invented myths and gods that he used to explain what he couldn't understand. As civilization emerged, philosophers came along. They sat around for most of the day and thought about what even today are still unanswerable questions. Who and what am I? How did I get here? Where am I going? Etc., etc. From this comes the formal study of philosophy and religion. Subsequent questions such as, do I have free will? Is there a God? What is the difference between the things I observe and myself? This gets into the mind-brain or subject-object duality issue. The Renaissance came along, and it introduces the turn to the subject point of view. Each person creates their own reality in their mind. And modern neuroscience concludes that each of us lives in a particular mental state caused by billions of neurons making trillions of connections that exchange electrochemical information that allows the brain to function like a computer. Input, process, output. All higher order mental phenomena like sensing, thinking, and feeling are emergent phenomena that come from this interconnectivity in our brain. We cannot reduce these higher order mental phenomena. We can't reduce or deconstruct them into pieces. Now here's an example of emergence. Consider a water wave. We see it move in a particular direction, at a particular speed, with a particular amplitude and frequency. But that wave simply emerges from all the billions of water molecules that obey Newton's laws. They're all in the water vibrating, and from all that collective vibration emerges the water wave. So now that I've outlined why we'll never know everything, let's take a look at some of the questions we are still asking. The first I'll pick comes from computer science. Can we solve the P versus NP problem? It's the major unsolved problem in computer science, and it asks whether every problem whose solution can be verified quickly, and that means by using an algorithm that runs in polynomial time, and that means I can go through it step by step and come up with a solution in my lifetime. This question asks whether every problem whose solution can be verified quickly can also be solved quickly. In other words, I have an algorithm that I can step through to solve the problem. We call these types of problems decidable, which is the same as computable. Now here's a definition of decidable. Decidable means capable of being decided. Pretty clear, I guess. For computer science, it's describing a set for which there exists an algorithm that will determine whether any element of that set is or is not within the set of solutions that can be arrived at in a finite amount of time. What about computability? Well, computability is the ability to solve a problem in an effective manner. It is a key topic for the field of computability theory within mathematical logic. And the theory of computation within computer science is an area still hotly debated. The computability of a problem is closely linked to the existence of an algorithm that solves the problem. And there are also deterministic, versus non-deterministic algorithms. A deterministic algorithm for given particular input always gives the same output. For non-deterministic algorithms, the same input, you might get a different output. Now, if computer scientists, mathematicians can prove that P equals NP, then for every decidable problem that can be solved using a computer, that's really good. And even the most advanced computers, these so-called quantum computers, are still basically Turing machines, which is the basic machine on which P equals NP problems can be solved. A Turing machine is named after Alan Turing, famous British mathematician who helped, in World War II, he cracked the code of the Germans Enigma machine. A Turing machine is a mathematical model of a computation that defines an abstract machine that manipulates symbols on a strip of tape according to a table of rules. Well, despite the model's simplicity, given any computer algorithm, a Turing machine capable of implementing that algorithm can be constructed. Think of it this way. It's a computer that takes an input string of zeros and ones, does calculations, and tells you the answer. If P equals NP is true, we can find algorithms that will solve problems everyone wants the answers to. For example, we can find the best investment portfolio, or we can forecast the weather, or we can figure out how to fold protein molecules to get vaccines. And here's a billion-dollar prize that computer scientists today are trying to solve. Cracking RSA encryption. If we can do that, every computer system and network and file can be hacked. Well, do subject matter experts, those are SMEs, do they say we'll get there? I've listened to many videos and read many articles. Some say yes and some say no, but you might wish to decide for yourself, given what I've explained so far in this podcast. And now to a second question. Will high-energy physics find a grand unified field theory, that unites general relativity and cosmology with the four forces that exist in our universe? The four forces are gravity, electromagnetism, the weak interaction among fundamental particles, that interaction holds atoms together, and then the strong interaction that actually holds the fundamental particles together. I've watched videos and read articles, and some of the subject matter experts say yes and some say no. These videos are fun to listen to for a while, and they all agree that high energy physics has become today more of a religion than a science. High energy physicists can only do thought experiments. They can no longer do experiments where they can observe and actually measure observable phenomena. So watch some of these videos if you wish, and you decide for yourself if high energy physics is believable. And here's the last question I'll delve into. What is consciousness? Well, physicists and neuroscientists have banded together to study this question. And they've answered the easy question. The easy question is, what causes consciousness? We now know that consciousness is caused when sensory, external or internal inputs impinge on the brain, our brain's state, causing it to make a computation-like change on this stream of information. And what's output is a change in brain state. We know that certain areas in the brain handle certain types of sensory input, and then they output electrochemical and neurochemical-like signals that the cognitive part of the brain interprets as emotions converted into feelings, or simply, generates thoughts. But the hard question, what is consciousness, still eludes even the best subject matter experts. Here's what they conjecture. The latest conjecture is that perhaps quantum mechanics, and by this they mean the collapse of the wave function, well, perhaps quantum mechanics inside microtubules cause consciousness. Microtubules are the largest structures inside the cell's cytoskeleton. They're about 24 nanometers thick. They have roles in cell movement, cell division, and transporting materials within cells. Now here's the idea. Each microtubule does a nanocomputation and communicates it within the cell to other microtubules, ultimately leading to intercellular communication. All this is the emergent consciousness. I've watched and read enough to know that subject matter experts are nowhere close to an answer on consciousness. But perhaps that's good, because neuroscience and AI-empowered computer science, and that's a tool for most areas of technology and engineering, are so new that they are far away from their asymptotic limits, which means we can make a lot of progress in biotech and artificial intelligence, which can translate into material progress for people and societies, as long as we employ them wisely. So there you have it, my simple scholar views on the hard problems. I hope you found this talk interesting, and I thank you for listening. Bye-bye until next time.
Bye.